Jimbo let go yesterday. I was told about a week ago in Scottsdale from a good friend of mine that it was a done deal. They were just waiting to figure out the buyout. And Jimbo went in and said, I want you to fire me, but you're going to pay me. He didn't want to deal with it anymore about the rumors and all that. He wanted out. Anything you could add to that and tell us what's going on in A&M and any insight on, are they really trying to go after Deion Sanders, or is it Urban Meyer, or who is it?
So from my understanding of what's happening at A&M right now is pretty interesting because, we used to go on what they call these coaches trips at Adidas, and we would take all these coaches and we would get them in where we'd go to the Caribbean, we'd go to Hawaii, we'd go to the Bahamas. And what was interesting is you'd have these guys away from everybody, just their wives or their girlfriends. And we could really bond with them over a 2 or 3 day period. I used to say you could take a relationship that would take a year, because if you think about relationships, right, and my old saying is, your relationship with somebody is a direct result of how much time you're willing to spend. Now, you got to spend quality time with him. We got Mora. Mora hated Adidas when he was at UCLA. We got him on one of those trips, and we could work with him for 2 or 3 days, and then he was great to deal with. But Jimbo was always interesting because when we were going on those trips, we knew NIL was coming. We didn't know when it would come, and Jimbo used to, pretty much be like, hey, man, NIL will be great for A&M. I've got all these millionaires and I've got all these kids. It'll be great. Well, I don't think it worked out as well as he thought it would, because, you start, and I think you guys were talking about it earlier, you start talking about some of these kids that, and this is what's so interesting about NIL, they'll make the most money they ever make in their lives, probably, a lot of these kids, by the time they're 22. And it's flipped, right? Usually when you get to be in the 50s, like my age, you start to make more money then than you did, but I'm mature and I know how to handle it. And these kids are it's inverted. And they're making more money now. But what's interesting about Jimbo, getting back to that, and I think this is really fascinating, I think when you listen to Ross talk, the AD there, he made it clear that, what do they owe him, $75, $76 million? Something like that?
I think they paid him, yeah.
$77 million. So here's their logic. And I like to put my mind in the head of the AD. They don't believe Jimbo's the leader. They don't like the people that he surrounded himself with. They want Jimbo gone, and they don't think Jimbo's the answer. So here's what you have as an AD. You say to yourself, okay, do I just wait another year and then it's going to cost me $68 million? Because you're really only saving $9 million by firing him now, because you still got to pay him the 68, and you lose a year of getting your program back on track. So they look at it as, we're not losing 77, we're going to lose $9 million because we're going to have to pay it out next year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. When they got that money, Shannon, I don't know if you can explain it, when they got money like the Saudis and Live Golf. Like Pat talks about all the time, you can't even fly over the money they have, right? No. Like, if you got that much money, is $9 million really? They don't care. They're going to get a collective anyway to pay that bill and get that guy out of there. So speaking of who could possibly take over, and before we get into Urban, who I know is going to be on everybody's wish list, let me ask you this. Lane Kiffin, I think, has a $9 million buyout only. So he's on the end. So, but we've heard the Lane Kiffin. I love Lane. Me and him are good friends. But he hasn't got over the proverbial hump and won anything meaningful. He's turned around programs from bottom feeders to relevant, but I don't think he's got them over the hump. James Franklin, similar situation at Penn State. I think that is probably, it's not lateral. I think A&M's a step up, but again, what the Big Ten's becoming with SC, UCLA, and all these other things, I don't know if it's such a bad idea to leave Penn State. I would stay because he just can't beat Ohio State or Michigan yet. And he continues to bitch about the NIL, that they're not getting the money at Penn State. So he's mentioned those things, Shannon, which is ironic that he's in the mix of possibly the A&M, argument here as far as a coach to take over. And I don't know, you got a guy in Colorado now, and who's hot, and I think his buyout's only $13 million. So the buyouts is what I'm trying to bring up to you. Are they going to go after a guy that just has a cheap buyout, or are they going to go after somebody sitting out on TV like an Urban and try to throw the biggest bag possible at him?